When Sonic's arse crashed onto the scene in 1996, Sony were touting the Bandicoot as the platformer to take down the plumber. And it must have worked out somewhat decently, as Crash Bandicoot has been in our lives for almost 25 years now, and shows no signs of slowing down. Except for that one time where he didn't have a new game for 10 years, but he's back now. So let's celebrate by taking a look at his entire past, ranking every Crash game from worst to best. Platformers, racing games, minigame compilations. We're looking at Crash's entire gamography today. Well, except for mobile games. Most of them can't be accessed today through simple means, and On the Run has had such a weird release and isn't actually officially released. But the list will include all of the handheld versions of games that are also on the big boy consoles, as they are all essentially different games. I'll also be judging all of the games based on their original versions, no remakes in today's list, although the remakes wouldn't likely change any of the game's placements anyway. So that leaves us with 20 games, the quality of which are completely all over the place. Crash has jumped around from all kinds of publishers and developers, so the series has a pretty interesting history to say the least. All of the footage you'll be seeing in this video was captured by yours truly. In fact, I recently did max percentage playthroughs of all of these games. You heard me right, max completion runs of every single game. So I think I know a bit about Crash Bandicoot if I do say so myself. But this list is 105% my opinion, so don't take it personally if your favourite is ranked at number 20. But trust me, it won't be. Anywho, it's about time that we got on with the list. Crash Boom Bang is one of the absolute worst games that I have ever played. How on earth did they let Earth's mightiest marsupial fall this far? This DS Mario Party ripoff is just abysmal in all of the ways you could imagine and more. The controls are terrible, the minigames are either boring, painfully easy, or downright broken. But the worst part is that none of this even matters, because you don't even need to play well in order to beat this game, because the boards end whenever anyone completes the objectives, and whether you win or lose, it doesn't change anything. In fact, you don't have to play the game at all to beat it, because the game auto advances through everything apart from the board clear screen and the betting screen. So not only is the game straight up not fun to play, but it even gives you the option to not play it at all if you don't want to, and trust me, that's always the better option. Crash of the Titans on Game Boy Advance is better than Crash Boom Bang, but that's like saying that getting punched in the face is better than, well, Crash Boom Bang. They're both still terrible. Crash of the Titans isn't as outwardly pathetic as Boom Bang though. There is still a competent game here that functions fine enough. It's just a really basic, really boring 2D platformer. The levels are totally uninspired. The ones where you just walk to the right are very boring, but they're still better than the levels that try to incorporate a bit of a maze, as those ones are super tedious. Other than that, the game tried to work in some sort of combat system from the main console version. All this equates to though is mash the B button in most instances. And the bosses in this game are just... I'll let the footage speak for itself on that one. So, when you pick up a game with the word racing in the title, you expect that, I don't know, at least 90% of your time spent playing that game would be racing, right? Well, apparently Radical Entertainment didn't think so when they made Crash Tag Team Racing. And you might think I'm referring to the on-foot exploration portion when I make that statement. I'm not. I'm actually referring to the racing portion of the game, because during the races, the game goes out of its way to encourage you not to race. You see, Crash Tag Team Racing's major gimmick is fusing your car with opponents. With a fused vehicle, you can either drive it or control the weapon to blast the rest of your opponents. While doing this, your AI companion makes their way around the track without fault. Case in point, if you want to win this racing game, don't race. Even if you want to race, the driving mechanics are the worst out of any other racing game in the series. Outside of being rather unpolished, the on-foot segments are fine, but they're nothing special. I wouldn't go to this game for your Crash platforming fix when there are obviously so many other superior options. The bowling minigame is quite fun though. Mind Over Mutant for DS is, for all intents and purposes, a better version of Titan's GBA. Its levels are a little bit more interesting with better flow and more satisfying secrets. The combat is a touch better, and the bosses are, well, frankly, a world better. Some of them are actually quite good. I also like how the unlockable costumes give Crash unique power-ups, but at the end of the day, it's just another below average platformer. And it's not like the world is starved of good 2D platformers, so I can't really recommend this one. I'm not sure if this is a controversial opinion because I never really saw anyone talk negatively about Crash Bandicoot 2 Entranced. I only played through this one myself for the first time recently. I was really looking forward to it and expected it to be at least on par with the first GBA Crash game. And because of that fact, this was honestly the most disappointing game for me on the entire list. Vicarious Visions just dropped the ball in every area. This game is worse about screen crunch than the first game. Many levels are over-designed and the foreground often blends into the background. The 3D perspective levels are much worse. The bosses are frustratingly annoying and annoyingly frustrating. The hidden gem shard locations are painfully obvious compared to the coloured gems of the previous game. The level themes are spread way too thin. The new super slide and super jump abilities are just accidents waiting to happen. And the atmosphere stages are terrible in this game. From all that, maybe it sounds like the game would be lower. Well, no, it's not that bad. While I can't say I like the game, it does have some fun moments that felt more in line with my expectations. I just wish the whole game would have been that, and am honestly still surprised that it isn't. I like to think that I'm quite easygoing and enjoy many of the games I play, even if some aren't considered the greatest. It pains me to say that I don't like the bottom 5 games on the list, but Crash Bash is where that changes. Crash Boom Bang, this is not. It's also no Mario Party 2, but it can be fun in the right circumstances. Like some of the games here, Ballistics, Pogo Pandemonium, Crate Crush, they're great ideas for minigames and I think they are a lot of fun in multiplayer. What about the adventure mode though? Well, it can be played through entirely in co-op, which is pretty cool. Beating it is a bit of a slog since you have to replay the same minigames many times in order to advance. Okay, a bit tedious, but I can handle it. But going for 200% is an experience. The difficulty is horribly unbalanced. Maybe some of the challenges weren't playtested enough because they are often heavily skewed in favour of the computer. I'm not gonna lie, it's a pretty bad time. Just going over some of the footage gave me horrific flashbacks. But during this trial, my brother and I managed to achieve a dub clutcher than anything you will see on any Overwatch, Fortnite or Sonic Shuffle compilation. I played the DS version of Crash of the Titans after the console version, and you know what? I was pleasantly surprised. It's not that bad. It's very different to the console versions, and they put a lot of effort into ensuring that it wasn't seen as an inferior version. Unlike the console versions, it's much closer to what you'd expect from a Naughty Dog era Crash game. Linear corridor style levels with boxes to break, and even a gem to collect for breaking them all. Can you believe it? There are also these side levels where you ride on a Titan controlled by the touchscreen, and these are decent fun too. You can even play as Nina Cortex. Now that's something you couldn't do in the console versions. It's not all sunshine and rainbows however. Most of the levels overstay their welcome and some of the box placement isn't great. There's also the ever so janky combat and a lot of it. So yeah, obviously this doesn't hold a candle to any of the other Crash games in this style, but if you've already played those to death, then consider giving Crash of the Titans DS a try. You might find that you enjoy it. Next up we have another minigame compilation kinda not. Crash Fusion, or Crash Purple as it's known outside of Europe, is a crossover game with the Spyro the Dragon universe. On the surface it looks like a platformer, but step through one of those portals and it's another minigame compilation. This one is usually lumped in as one of the bad Crash games, but I don't know, I kinda like it. The minigames aren't quite as ambitious as those in Crash Bash. They're very simple in fact, but I don't know, they're kind of fun. Some of them use the box collecting mechanic quite well, and there are actually some bonus round-esque levels in here which are alright. There's a bunch of collectible cards in here too, which for the most part is a bit of a time waster, but what can I say, I had fun collecting them. I'm not saying it's amazing or anything, but at least it's better than the Spyro version. The birth of Crash of the Titans was the death of Crash for me. When it came out, I was much younger and much quicker to judge. I thought this game looked atrocious. From the beat 'em up gameplay to Crash's look, none of it looked like Crash Bandicoot. But as a spry old 25-year-old, I finally gave the game a shot. And yeah, it's pretty good. It's an action game first and foremost though, with some light platforming. It definitely feels like a 3D brawler of its time though. You got your light attacks, your heavy attacks, charge a bar and you might get a third super cool attack every once in a while. The Titans do bring a bit of uniqueness to the table though. There are a decent number of them and some offer some much needed variety, like Snipe, which as the name implies, can use ranged attacks. While the art style is still super weird to me, like I don't know what they were thinking with Tiny. It isn't as jarring as I thought it would be, and the story is alright. Other than that, the challenge rooms are enjoyable, the collectibles are fun to get. It's a pretty alright game overall. Then we have the sequel, Mind Over Mutant. At first I was very surprised about just how much more I was enjoying this over Titans, and I liked Titans decently enough. But if you wanted more of a platformer with Titans, then Mind Over Mutant may be the game for you, as it's more of a 50-50 split between platforming and combat. In fact, Mind Over Mutant features a connected world with larger environments and a greater sense of exploration. There are even 2D segments that connect the different worlds. It's good stuff. However, the more I played through the game, that initial excitement waned thin after I started noticing some of the game's flaws. Combat was relatively simple in Titans, but it feels even more dumbed down in this. The combo multiplayer system is pretty rubbish, as you lose your multiplayer anytime you get hit, and it's not like you can really do much to avoid damage. The most egregious issue, however, is the backtracking. A lot of the time you just have to walk across the entire game to get to the area you want to go to. Sometimes this means replaying whole platforming segments. Despite these flaws, however, Mind Over Mutant is still a far more interesting game than Titans. After finishing both, I still preferred it overall, but not much more to the point where I could put it any higher than number 11. Crash Nitro Kart for the Game Boy Advance is not half bad. It's like if you took Crash Team Racing and Mario Kart Super Circuit and smushed them together, or if you made them smush and they had a baby. The tracks are very dumbed down compared to the console version. They're all flat now. The only real difference between the tracks is how they implemented the twists and turns, and how the tracks look graphically. And I've got to say, they did a good job of making them unique to one another. The physics are good, the controls are a little unintuitive, especially if you've played the console version before, but it's nothing that you can't get used to. In short, if you asked for Crash Nitro Kart for Christmas and your parents accidentally got you this version instead of the big, beefy Xbox version that you actually wanted, I don't think you'd be too hard done by. I mean, I would probably still cry, let's be honest, but at least they didn't accidentally buy Tag Team Racing. If I was a bad writer, this is the part where I would say, the one that started it all. But I'm a good writer, so I know better ways to denote the birth of a franchise. Once upon a time, Naughty Dog made a Crash Bandicoot game for the Sony PlayStation. It was the first Crash Bandicoot game, and that game was this game for the Sony PlayStation. To be honest, the best way to describe this game is that it's a really good platformer. Good level design, good enemy placement, solid movement, and a fair and fun challenge, at least in the non-remake version. I'm telling you, the bridge levels in the PS1 game are great. That's a lot of praise for a game that's only number 9. Simply put, Crash 1 is rather basic when compared to what came after, for a few reasons, but just the absence of the slide slows the pace down pretty drastically. Forcing players to beat a level in one life and break all of the boxes in order to earn a gem is also a bit excessive in my opinion. Crash 1 is still a good one though, hence why it made it into the top 10. If there's a game that really has its haters, it is Crash Bandicoot The Wrath of Cortex. And there are many reasons not to like this game. Crash is very slow and floaty compared to the previous games. Levels can sometimes feel a little empty. There are quite a few alternate gameplay styles that are straight up bad, and it's by far the easiest Crash game in this style. But here's the thing, I love Crash 3 Warped, and this is the only 3D Crash game that completely copied the incredible Crystal Gem Relic objective formula of Warped. And for that, it still manages to achieve a certain minimum level of enjoyability for me. Don't get me wrong, if it used the Crash 3 formula and it was utter garbage, then I wouldn't like it. But it's not that bad. Look past the negative parts and you might come to enjoy it. I even made a video of 5 things that Wrath of Cortex did better than the original trilogy. Not to try and convince you that the game is better than the original trilogy, but to show that it's not as bad as others would have you believe, and that maybe you should consider giving it a shot. So I mentioned before that Entranced was the most disappointed I was out of any game on this list, but Tuinsanity was a very close second. It is the most broken, unfinished game on this entire list. Okay, maybe it's not as broken as Tag Team Racing, but that game sucks regardless of if it worked properly or not. Tuinsanity on the other hand doesn't suck. It's really good in fact. It was the first Crash platformer to ditch the hub world or map screen. The game's levels seamlessly lead on from one to the next. There isn't any annoying backtracking like Mind Over Mutant, as long as you try to grab the collectibles as you go. And why wouldn't you? The gems are so much fun to pick up in this game. Most of them are anyway. The many different playable characters are a blast. Crash, Cortex, Crash and Cortex, Nina, they're all great. Tuinsanity also has the best characterization of all the Crash games. I really think that if any game deserves the Insane Trilogy treatment, it's this game, because if it had more polish, it really could be one of the best Crash games of the lot. There's been many ups and downs on this list so far. Straight up bad games that I still like, good games with a lot of flaws. But these next 6 games I can say that I really do like without a shadow of a doubt. And the first of these is the console version of Crash Nitro Kart. It's easy to sum this game up. It's a worse version of Crash Team Racing. With that said, this apple didn't fall far from the tree. It's still a great racing game in my opinion. The boost mechanic is still incredible. The adventure mode is still a heck of a lot of fun, as is going for the 101%. Like many non-Naughty Dog Crash games of the time though, this game is held back by the amount of polish. Its controls aren't as good as CTR and it's a bit buggy. Buggy as in there are glitches, not the vehicle. For those reasons, I can't put this game any higher than number 6. You see, this is the reason Entranced was so disappointing for me, because I love Crash Bandicoot XS. Don't you mean the huge adventure? What is there to say about this game? It's a 2D Crash game as you'd expect. Collect the crystals, smash boxes for gems, complete time trials for relics. Only it's in 2D. And it's great. XS doesn't fall into any of the pitfalls that its sequel did, except that it does have some screen crunch, but the way the levels are designed, this isn't too much of a problem. Sometimes they did get fancy with these 3D perspective levels, which I think work well. Like these polar bear levels run at just the right speed so that upcoming obstacles are easy enough to avoid, and they give you an abundance of aku-akus to stop these relics being a chore. The boss battles are fine, there aren't any agonizing levels that I can think of, it's just a great game. Seriously, check it out if you haven't. At number 4, we have Crash Bandicoot 4. Let me take you on a journey of my journey with Crash 4. When I first booted up this game, I was immediately impressed. The 60 FPS looked excellent and the controls felt buttery smooth. I thought that this was the return of Crash that I'd always been dreaming of. Then I got to the end of the first level, missing a single box, and the pain started from there. Toys for Bob were heavily misguided when it came to one aspect of Crash 4. In fact, I think the whole world is misguided about this. It's the notion that Crash Bandicoot is all about difficulty. I really don't think that's the case. Yes, that may have been the case in Crash 1, especially the Insane Trilogy version, but Crash 2 and 3 aren't that hard, apart from some select challenges like death routes and relics and such. Toys for Bob took this notion of grueling difficulty and ran with it in every area of this game. Challenging platforming is all well and good, but hiding boxes off screen in almost every level? No, this isn't Spyro, this is Crash. On top of that, the game is incredibly bloated in terms of max completion criteria, forcing you to redo the same stuff over and over and over again as perfectly as possible sometimes. And this is before you have to go for platinum relics. So why do I love this game so much? Well, it's not for the same reasons that I love certain other Crash games, which is the joy they bring when going for max completion percentage. In Crash 4, I was forced to put that mentality aside, and when I finally did, I began to see that this game looks and plays like a dream. The quantum masks aren't just a gimmick, the levels that feature them are meticulously built around them, and they work like a charm. The multiple playable characters play just different enough from one another that they feel different yet are easy to pick up. When the combination of the triple spin and slide spin click, shooting through the levels at top speed feels so good. And the flashback tapes, what a genius idea. Crash 4 really has some of the best Crash moments to date. As a massive Crash Bandicoot fan, I have a lot of problems with Crash 4, but as a fan of 3D platforming games in general, man, this game really is excellent. CTR Crash Team Racing. Move over Mario Kart. No, seriously, move over Mario Kart 64 because I think Crash Team Racing is the best kart racer of its generation and is still one of the best ones to this day. There's one major aspect of CTR that makes it so good, and that's the boost system. You get boosts from boost pads, drifting and hang time. Any boost you do combine to extend your boost. Play your car right and you can literally boost your way through entire tracks. As you get better at the game, the amount of fun you have just continues to increase. There are the usual items and shortcuts, but your driving skill is what really determines whether you'll win or lose, especially during some of the harder challenges like the relic trials and the ghost times. And I haven't even mentioned the adventure mode yet. It's one of the best single player experiences in a kart racer, with a cool hub world and tons of different challenges to do in each track. With Crash Team Racing, Naughty Dog definitely went out with a bang. Speaking of Naughty Dog, I still don't think any developer has managed to top them when it comes to Crash Bandicoot platformers. Crash 1 was good, but Crash 2 was just in a league of its own when it released in 1997. I don't think Crash 1 had a chance of touching Super Mario 64, but Crash 2 had a real shot. The controls were far less rigid than the first game for one thing, and could you imagine Crash today without the slide jump, the crouch jump, or the body slam? I complained a bit about Crash 4's difficulty, but I don't think it's the fact that it's hard that's the issue, it's the difficulty curve. Crash 4 has a gentle curve from hard to harder. Crash 2 is much better about easing the player in. Easier levels at the start, harder levels at the end. The gems are also handled well, for the most part. Some levels have some well hidden boxes or hard to reach paths that one has to go down for boxes. Not all levels like Crash 4, so the player can still feel good when they get a decent amount of gems their first time through the game. I also think that this game does a fantastic job of signposting its secret paths. If something looks fishy, try interacting with it. Crash 2 doesn't get everything right. I'm not a big fan of the split paths, for example. If only there was a sequel that could improve on this one. Well, by golly, there is. Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped is not only my favourite Crash game, but also in my top 10 or 15 games of all time. It's such a well put together platformer. For the most part, it just builds on what made Crash 2 so good, but boy did they build. Crash 3 has additional unlockable power-ups, more gameplay styles, which is apparently a contentious aspect, but I love almost all of them. The relics are another excellent inclusion. Crash 3 has the best time trials in the series, as the relics were designed knowing that players would have to speed through them for the relic. Even with all this new stuff though, Crash 3 didn't skimp on the traditional Crash platforming levels. They're still some of the best in the series. Plus, going for 105% completion is such a good time, and doesn't shave away days of your life like Crash 4. I've done it so many times and have loved it every single time. I think I will love it every single time until the end of time. It just doesn't get old. That's the mark of a good video game right there. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments if you were crazy enough to get 106% on Crash 4 like I was. Also, if you missed my last video, I've recently opened a Patreon, so if you'd like to directly support me and help me make more of these kinds of videos, you can do so over there. But until next time, have fun playing video games.